Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
There's a dynamic nobody talks about honestly. Not because it's spiritual. Not because it's mysterious. But because it's uncomfortable. Because it forces a man to face something he can usually avoid. Not her. Himself. And the strange part is, it usually doesn't happen when she chases. It doesn't happen when she explains. It doesn't happen when she keeps proving how much she cares. It happens when she stops reaching for him emotionally. Not out of anger. Not to teach him a lesson. Not because she suddenly stopped loving him. But because something inside her becomes tired of carrying both people. And what follows is rarely beautiful. At first, he feels relief. Then distraction. Then freedom. Then something else. Something he can't quite explain. He checks his phone for no reason. Replays conversations he claimed didn't matter. Finds himself thinking about a random Tuesday afternoon 6 months ago. And suddenly the silence he asked for starts sounding different. Because the forbidden dynamic that wakes him up isn't her presence. It's the moment her energy is no longer protecting him from himself. And if you've ever lived through this, either as the one who left, or the one who stayed too long, you already know how strange the rest of this story becomes. I don't think people talk about this dynamic honestly. They talk about it dramatically. They talk about it spiritually. They talk about it like some cosmic event that suddenly transforms a man overnight. But that's not how I saw it happen. That's not how I lived it. What I saw was much quieter. Much messier. And honestly, a little embarrassing. Because the thing that changed him wasn't some grand realization. It wasn't losing her. It wasn't even the fear of losing her. It was something far more uncomfortable. It was the moment she stopped carrying the emotional weight of both people. And if you've ever been close enough to watch this happen, you know exactly what I mean. At first, almost nothing changes. That's the strange part. From the outside, everything looks normal. He still goes to work. Still sends the occasional text. Still laughs at jokes. Still posts things online. Still tells himself everything is fine. But underneath all of that, something has shifted. Not in him. In her. And he doesn't notice immediately. Because for a long time, she was doing things he never fully saw. She was starting conversations. Maintaining connection. Bridging awkward silences. Checking in after disagreements. Being emotionally present even when she was tired. Making space for his confusion. Giving him time when he was distant. Giving him understanding when he was inconsistent. And the strange thing is, people often don't notice emotional labor when it's being done well. It becomes invisible. Expected. Normal. Like electricity. Nobody thinks about electricity until the lights go out. I remember watching this happen once. Or maybe if I'm being honest, I remember being this person. I'm not entirely sure which memory hurts more. There was this period where everything seemed stable. No major fights. No dramatic breakups. No doors slamming. No final conversation. Just routine. And routine can be deceptive. Because routine often looks like security, even when a relationship is quietly starving. I remember seeing a message come through. Nothing special. Just a simple check-in. One of those ordinary messages you barely notice in the moment. And I remember thinking, I'll answer later. Then later became tomorrow. Tomorrow became 3 days. 3 days became a week. And somehow that didn't seem important. At least not then. The dangerous thing about emotional distance is that it rarely arrives with an alarm. It arrives gradually. Comfortably. Almost politely. You adapt to it before you realize what's happening. And meanwhile she keeps trying. A little less enthusiastically. A little more carefully. A little more tired than before. But still trying. And that's where most people misunderstand this dynamic. They think the turning point is when she leaves. It's usually not. The turning point happens much earlier. The turning point is when she stops reaching. Not because she stopped caring. Sometimes she still cares deeply. That's what makes it so painful. She just can't keep carrying something by herself anymore. And if you've never been on either side of that experience, it sounds simple. But it's not. Because when she stops reaching, nothing dramatic happens. No explosion. No confrontation. No announcement. The emotional oxygen simply becomes thinner. And at first, he experiences that as relief. That's the part nobody likes admitting. Relief. Not panic. Not heartbreak. Relief. Because emotional intimacy asks things from people. It asks for presence, attention, vulnerability, consistency. And sometimes those things feel heavy when you're emotionally conflicted. Part of him wanted closeness. Another part wanted escape. Part of him wanted her. Another part wanted the freedom of not needing anyone. And somehow he tried to have both. A lot of people do. I think that's one of the ugliest truths about relationships. Sometimes we genuinely care about someone while simultaneously resisting the responsibility that comes with caring. Not because we're evil. Not because we're heartless. Because we're human. Confused. Immature in certain places. Terrified in others. So when her energy begins pulling back, he initially interprets it as space. Finally, room to breathe. Less pressure. Less emotional expectation. More freedom. At least that's what he tells himself. And maybe part of him even believes it. For a while. But here's where things become interesting. Because what he experiences as freedom isn't actually freedom. It's the temporary absence of accountability. And those are not the same thing. Accountability has a way of making us aware of things we'd rather avoid. Our inconsistency. Our emotional contradictions. The ways we ask for understanding without offering much in return. The conversations we postpone. The feelings we don't name. The effort we keep promising but never fully give. When someone stops holding a mirror up to those things, it feels easier. Until it doesn't. I remember one specific moment. A completely insignificant moment. Or at least it should have been. I was sitting in a car at a red light. Nothing emotional had happened that day. Nothing meaningful. Just traffic. The radio playing quietly. A half-empty coffee cup in the holder. And for some reason I realized I hadn't heard from her. Not that day. Not that week. Not really. And what startled me wasn't the silence. It was how long the silence had existed before I noticed it. That realization hit differently. Because suddenly a question appeared. Not loudly. Just quietly. Like something tapping on a window. When was the last time she reached out first? I genuinely couldn't remember. And somehow that bothered me. Not enough to act immediately. Just enough to feel uncomfortable. Which is often how these things begin. Not with heartbreak. With discomfort. A tiny crack in the story you've been telling yourself. Then life continues. Work. Errands. Meetings. Laundry. Gym sessions. Random conversations. The ordinary machinery of daily life. And yet something starts feeling slightly off. Not devastating. Just off. Like walking into a room and sensing something is missing without knowing what. And because we're human, we often explain away that feeling. We're tired. Busy. Stressed. Distracted. We come up with reasonable explanations. Some of them are even true. But underneath those explanations, another reality exists. The emotional structure that quietly supported the connection is disappearing. And now he has to encounter something he hasn't encountered before. It's absence. Not her absence. That's different. The absence of her effort. The absence of her emotional reach. The absence of the bridge she kept building. And here's the part that took me years to understand. The forbidden dynamic isn't that she withdraws. The forbidden dynamic is what her withdrawal reveals. Because suddenly all the things he thought were stable have to stand on their own. Without her maintaining them. Without her rescuing awkward moments. Without her initiating repair. Without her carrying hope on difficult days. And that's when reality starts becoming visible. Not immediately. But eventually. Very, very eventually. Sometimes months later. Sometimes longer. Because emotional realization has terrible timing. At least for some men. I've seen it arrive long after the opportunity to respond has passed. Long after the conversation ended. Long after the explanation would have mattered. Long after she stopped waiting. And maybe that's why this dynamic feels so uncomfortable. Because it forces a confrontation nobody can outsource. Not to friends. Not to relationship advice. Not to distractions. Not to work. Not to another connection. Just yourself. A private encounter with your own emotional reality. And at the beginning, almost nobody recognizes that's what's happening. They think they're reacting to her. They're not. They're reacting to the space where her effort used to be. Did she leave? Not exactly. Then what happened? She stopped carrying him. Was she trying to teach him a lesson? Maybe. Maybe not. Sometimes people aren't teaching lessons. Sometimes they're simply exhausted. And that's what changed everything. No, not immediately. That's the important part. Nothing changes immediately. The silence comes first. The realization comes later. And somewhere between those two moments, the story really begins. The strange thing is, when she stops reaching, he doesn't immediately fall apart. He doesn't sit on the edge of his bed staring into the darkness. He doesn't suddenly realize she's important. He doesn't wake up in panic. At least most of the time. What usually happens first is much less dramatic. He relaxes. And that's the part that nobody likes talking about. Because it sounds cruel. It sounds like proof that he never cared. But life is rarely that simple. Sometimes relief and love exist in the same person at the same time. Which is confusing. And honestly, a little ugly. I remember a period in my life when someone stopped asking things from me emotionally. No more difficult conversations. No more, how are you really feeling? No more moments where I had to explain why I disappeared emotionally for 3 days after feeling close. No more attempts to understand me. No more invitations to be vulnerable. At first, it felt easier. I slept better. Or at least I thought I did. I spent more time with friends. Focused on work. Went to the gym more consistently. Started checking things off my to-do list. Productive. Efficient. In control. That's the story I told myself. And maybe some of it was true. But looking back, there was another story happening underneath it. One I didn't want to see. Because while my mind was feeling relief, my body was doing something else. The body notices things before the ego does. That's one of the most frustrating truths I've learned. You can convince yourself you're fine. Your nervous system doesn't always cooperate. I remember walking through a grocery store one evening. Nothing emotional had happened. I wasn't thinking about her. At least consciously. I was looking for coffee. That's it. Coffee. And suddenly I saw a brand she used to buy. One stupid bag of coffee. Nothing special. And for half a second something tightened in my chest. Then disappeared. Just gone. Like it never happened. I grabbed a different brand and kept walking. But I remember the feeling. The body recognized something before the mind allowed it. And moments like that started happening more often. Not enough to alarm me. Just enough to follow me. Like background noise. The problem is that relief can be incredibly convincing. Especially when you've spent months feeling emotionally overwhelmed. Especially when you've been avoiding things you don't know how to deal with. Especially when intimacy has started triggering fears you can't explain. So when emotional pressure decreases, you naturally interpret that as improvement. Of course you do. Anybody would. But improvement and avoidance can look surprisingly similar in the beginning. Both feel lighter. Both feel calmer. Both reduce discomfort. The difference only becomes visible later. And later is where things get dangerous. Because relief has momentum, you start building a life around it. More work. More distractions. More movement. More plans. You stay busy. Very busy. Almost impressively busy. And if anyone asks how you're doing, you have evidence. Look at everything you're accomplishing. Look at how productive you've become. Look at how stable things seem. But then strange little moments start appearing. Tiny cracks. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to be annoying. You'll finish a workout and instinctively reach for your phone. Not to text her. Just to check. You tell yourself you're checking notifications. Maybe you are. But somewhere inside you know exactly whose name you're hoping to see. And when it isn't there, you feel something. Not heartbreak. Not yet. Just a brief drop. Like missing a step in the dark. Then you lock the screen and move on. Or at least pretend to. That's another thing people rarely admit. How much pretending happens during this phase? Pretending not to notice. Pretending not to care. Pretending the silence feels normal. Pretending the emotional shift isn't affecting you. The strange thing is, sometimes the performance isn't for other people. It's for yourself. I think that's what surprised me most. How much energy I spent convincing myself of things I didn't fully believe. I'm fine. Everything's fine. This is healthier. I needed this. Maybe. Maybe not. The truth was probably somewhere in the middle. Part of me genuinely enjoyed the space. Part of me genuinely missed the connection. Those realities existed simultaneously. And that contradiction drove me crazy. Because people like simple explanations. They like certainty. They want someone to be the villain. Someone to be the victim. Someone to have all the answers. Real life rarely cooperates. Sometimes a man misses someone while actively avoiding them. Sometimes he wants intimacy and resents it at the same time. Sometimes he feels safer alone while secretly wishing she would text. Human beings are weird. Emotionally inconsistent. Capable of holding opposing truths simultaneously. And nowhere does that become more obvious than here. I remember one night sitting in my apartment after work. Nothing remarkable. Just an ordinary Tuesday. The television was on. I wasn't watching it. A half-finished meal sat on the coffee table. The sink needed cleaning. The laundry basket was overflowing. Normal life. Mundane life. The kind of evening nobody remembers. And suddenly I realized something. Nobody had asked me how my day went. Such a small thing. Embarrassingly small. The kind of realization you almost don't want to admit. Because it sounds insignificant. But it stayed with me. Not because I needed constant attention. Because I had quietly grown accustomed to someone's presence. Someone caring. Someone noticing. Someone remembering details. And now that energy was gone. Not dramatically. Just absent. Like a lamp that had been removed from a room. You don't notice the darkness immediately. You notice it gradually. Hour by hour. Day by day. Moment by moment. The weird thing is that he often responds to this discomfort by becoming even busier. Not less. He fills the space. More work. More entertainment. More goals. More noise. Because if he keeps moving, he doesn't have to sit with what's actually happening. I've done this. Most people have. You suddenly become obsessed with improving your life. Cleaning the garage. Reorganizing closets. Starting projects. Making plans. And some of those things are genuinely healthy. That's what makes it complicated. Avoidance doesn't always look unhealthy. Sometimes it looks incredibly responsible. That's why it's hard to detect. The behavior itself isn't necessarily the problem. It's the motivation underneath it. And underneath it, There's often something uncomfortable waiting. Something that hasn't surfaced yet. Something that still has no language. Because he isn't grieving her. Not exactly. Not yet. He's experiencing the removal of emotional familiarity. And those are different things. One night he checks her profile. Just once. No interaction. No message. No likes. No comments. Just a quick look. Pure curiosity. At least that's what he tells himself. Then 2 days later he checks again. Then again. Then maybe he goes a week without looking. Then suddenly looks 3 times in one night. Not because he has a plan. Not because he's ready to reach out. Because confusion creates strange behavior. And uncertainty loves loopholes. He wants information without vulnerability. Connection without exposure. Reassurance without risk. Most people do. Especially when they're caught between missing someone and protecting themselves from missing them. Then comes one of the most uncomfortable realizations. Not a big realization. A tiny one. The dangerous kind. The kind that stays. He notices that she isn't chasing. She isn't forcing conversations. She isn't trying to pull him closer. She isn't demanding answers. And for some reason, that bothers him. Not because he wants pressure. Because he expected her to remain available. Expected. That's the word. And expectations are dangerous when they're invisible. Sometimes we don't realize we've built them until reality refuses to cooperate. That's when the first real discomfort appears. Because now he has a choice. He can continue believing the silence means nothing. Or he can start asking why it suddenly feels so loud. Most men don't choose immediately. I didn't. Maybe you didn't either. Maybe he keeps moving. Keeps working. Keeps distracting himself. Keeps telling himself the same story. But somewhere underneath all of that activity, something has already started. A question. A quiet one. Small enough to ignore. Persistent enough to return. Again. And again. And again. Why does this feel different? No answer yet. Just the question. And that's how the next phase begins. Not with heartbreak. Not with regret. Not with realization. Just a man standing in the middle of a life that still looks completely normal. Wondering why the freedom he wanted suddenly feels a little lonelier than he expected. Nobody warns you about this part. People talk about heartbreak. They talk about missing someone. They talk about grief. But they rarely talk about the strange period before any of those words fully apply. The period where nothing dramatic is happening. No emotional breakdown. No desperate messages. No midnight confessions. Just ordinary life. And somehow ordinary life becomes the problem. Because that's where the memories start hiding. Not in the big moments. Not in the anniversaries. Not in the obvious places. In the tiny places. The places you never thought mattered. That's what catches him off guard. Because he thinks he's moved past it. Or at least moved far enough away from it. He's functioning. Working. Sleeping. Paying bills. Making plans. Laughing at things. Living. And then one random Tuesday afternoon he hears someone laugh. Not her. Just someone laughing across a parking lot. A completely different person. Different face. Different voice. And yet something about the sound hits the same note. And for half a second, she's there. Not physically. Just emotionally. Like a ghost passing through the room. Then she's gone again. The whole thing lasts maybe 2 seconds. But now his chest feels different. And he doesn't know why. So he shakes it off. Keeps walking. Keeps moving. Because that's what people do. We keep moving. Especially when we don't understand what we're feeling. I remember this happening to me with something even smaller. A stupid coffee mug. That's it. A mug. White ceramic. Tiny chip on the handle. Nothing meaningful. Nothing romantic. And one morning I reached for it automatically. Then realized it wasn't mine. It was hers. She had left it there months earlier. Months. The mug had existed in my kitchen for months. I walked past it every day. Never noticed. Then suddenly one morning it felt impossible not to notice. I just stood there staring at it. Like an idiot. Holding a coffee maker in one hand. Looking at a mug. And for some reason I couldn't explain. The room felt heavier. Not because of the mug. Because of everything attached to it. The memories stored inside ordinary objects. That's the thing about human beings. We don't remember logically. We remember emotionally. The brain files away strange details. The smell of someone's shampoo. The way they pronounce certain words. The exact expression they made when trying not to laugh. The pause before they answered a difficult question. The way they reached for your hand without thinking. You don't realize you're collecting these things until they're all you can find. And this is where the dynamic begins changing. Because now his mind is doing something it wasn't doing before. It's making connections. Against his will. Against his plans. Against his logic. The song that played during a road trip. The restaurant booth. The random neighborhood street. The movie quote she used repeatedly. Tiny fragments. Tiny emotional fingerprints. And suddenly the world becomes crowded with them. Not enough to destroy his day. Just enough to interrupt it. Again. And again. And again. The annoying thing is that these moments don't arrive when he's emotionally prepared. They arrive while buying groceries. While waiting in traffic. While brushing his teeth. While scrolling aimlessly before bed. Life keeps ambushing him with reminders. And because he's still in the phase where he's trying not to look too closely, he keeps dismissing them. It's nothing. Just a memory. Everybody remembers people. Fair enough. He's not wrong. But if it's nothing, why does it keep happening? That's the question he doesn't want to ask. Because asking it means slowing down. And slowing down means feeling. I think that's why so many men stay busy after emotional distance appears. Not because they're incapable of feeling. Because feeling catches up when movement stops. And eventually movement always stops. Usually at night. Night has a way of exposing things. The distractions get quieter. The phone becomes less interesting. The conversations end. The house settles. And suddenly there's space. Too much space. I remember lying in bed one night staring at the ceiling. Not sad. That's important. I wasn't sad. At least I didn't think I was. Just awake. 1 in the morning. Then 2. Then 3. And for some reason I started replaying a conversation from almost a year earlier. A completely forgettable conversation. At least it seemed forgettable at the time. She had said something. Nothing dramatic. Just one sentence. One ordinary sentence. And suddenly I couldn't stop hearing it. Not because of what she said. Because of what I understand now. That's another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes meaning arrives late. Painfully late. Months late. Years late. A sentence that sounded ordinary in the moment suddenly carries a different weight. Because now he has context he didn't have before. Now he can see what she was trying to tell him. Now he can see what she felt. Now he can see what he missed. And unfortunately, understanding has terrible timing. I sometimes think that's one of the cruelest parts of emotional growth. The awareness arrives after the moment needed it. Not before. After. And now those memories start returning with new meaning. That's why the small things become dangerous. Because they aren't just memories anymore. They're evidence. Evidence that there was more happening than he realized. Evidence that she mattered more than he admitted. Evidence that he wasn't nearly as detached as he pretended. And suddenly random moments begin carrying emotional weight. The drive home from work. The seat next to him. An empty passenger seat can say strange things. Especially at night. especially during long drives, especially when there's nobody there to interrupt his thoughts. I remember driving once after a particularly exhausting day. Rain on the windshield, streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. Nothing cinematic, just normal city traffic. And for some reason I caught myself reaching for my phone. Not to text, not even consciously, just reaching, as if some part of me expected to share the moment with someone. Then I stopped, put the phone down, kept driving, but the realization stayed. The habit remained long after the connection changed. And habits reveal things, maybe more than emotions sometimes, because habits bypass the stories we tell ourselves. The body remembers what the mind is trying to deny. The hand reaches, the eyes search, the attention drifts, before the rational brain can intervene. That's why he starts checking things. Not obsessively, not dramatically, just casually. Her profile, an old conversation, a photo, a voice note, something small, something harmless. Then he immediately feels ridiculous, closes the app, moves on. Why am I doing this? Good question. He doesn't know. Not fully. Part of him is looking for her. Part of him is looking for proof that he doesn't need to. And those are very different motivations. The contradiction becomes exhausting. Because now he's caught between two realities. The reality he wants, and the reality that's emerging. The reality he wants says, everything is fine. The reality that's emerging says, then why do these memories keep finding you? Why am I thinking about this now? The question appears again. Late at night, during a drive, standing in line somewhere, folding laundry, watching television without actually watching it. Why now? And for a while. There's no answer. Only repetition. Memory after memory. Moment after moment. Small things becoming impossible to ignore. Then eventually another voice appears. Quieter. More honest. Not loud enough to silence the denial. Just loud enough to challenge it. Because now there's room. That's the part nobody talks about. The memories were always there. He just couldn't hear them. Life was louder. Distractions were louder. Her effort was louder. The movement was louder. Now the silence has created space. And in that space, the small things begin speaking. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just persistently. A laugh. A coffee mug. A sentence. A song. A parking lot. A rainy drive home. Tiny pieces of a story he thought he had already moved beyond. But the story isn't finished. Not even close. Because what starts as memory is slowly becoming something else. Recognition. And recognition is much harder to escape. The memories aren't chasing him. The truth inside them is. And for the first time, he's beginning to notice. I think this is the chapter nobody wants to admit exists. Because this is where the story stops being about her. And starts becoming about him. Not the version of him he likes. Not the version he presents to other people. Not the version that looks calm, detached, rational, and in control. The other version. The one that realizes things late. Painfully late. Embarrassingly late. The version that suddenly understands a conversation 6 months after it happened. The version that finally feels something after everyone else has already moved on. The version that sits alone wondering why awareness always seems to arrive after the opportunity to act has disappeared. I know that's not true for every man. But I've seen it often enough to stop pretending it's rare. Sometimes emotional debt doesn't arrive when the bill is due. It arrives months later. And when it finally shows up, it wants interest. That's the strange thing. He thought he had escaped the emotional consequences. Not consciously. Nobody sits around thinking, perfect. I avoided accountability. It doesn't work like that. Life just continues. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. The relationship changes. The connection fades. The intensity disappears. And he assumes the story is ending. Meanwhile, the story is actually catching up. Quietly. Patiently. In the background. Because emotions don't always move at the speed of events. Sometimes they move at the speed of safety. And for a lot of men, real feelings don't surface until the threat of vulnerability has already passed. Which sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. But I've lived it. Maybe you have too. Maybe you've been sitting in a room months after something ended, suddenly feeling emotions you should have felt while it was happening. Not because you're heartless. Not because you didn't care. Because some part of you wasn't ready to know what it would cost to care. So you postponed the knowing, without realizing you were doing it. And eventually the postponed feelings come looking for you. I remember a conversation that haunted me for almost a year. At the time, it felt insignificant. She had been trying to explain something. Not accusing. Not attacking. Just explaining. The kind of conversation people have when they're trying very hard to be understood. I remember listening. Nodding. Responding. Saying all the appropriate things. And then moving on. At least I thought I moved on. Months later, I was standing in line at a gas station. Of all places. A gas station. Fluorescent lights. Terrible coffee. Someone arguing with a cashier. Nothing remotely emotional. And suddenly her words came back. Not the whole conversation. Just one sentence. One sentence. And this time I heard it differently. Not because the words changed. Because I had changed. Or maybe because my defenses had gotten tired. Either way, something landed. Finally. And I remember standing there thinking, oh, that's what she meant. Not intellectually. Emotionally. That's the difference. I understood her words when she said them. I just didn't feel them. And understanding without feeling can create a very convincing illusion. You think you've processed something. You haven't. You've categorized it. Filed it away. Stored it neatly in your head. Meanwhile, the emotional reality remains untouched. Waiting. That's where the debt begins. Because every moment he avoided fully experiencing doesn't disappear. It accumulates. Every conversation he minimized. Every concern he dismissed. Every emotional risk she took that he met with half presence. Every vulnerable truth she offered while he was only partially listening. None of it disappears. It waits. And eventually the waiting ends. The strange thing is that when emotional debt arrives, it rarely looks dramatic. It's not usually some cinematic breakdown. No music playing in the background. No dramatic realization under the rain. Real life is much less flattering. Sometimes it happens while folding laundry. Sometimes it happens during a commute. Sometimes it happens while staring at a microwave for 2 minutes waiting for leftovers to heat up. Human beings tend to imagine transformation as this beautiful, meaningful event. Most of mine happened under terrible lighting. And this realization was no different. The awareness started arriving in fragments. Little pieces. Scattered observations. Things that didn't fit together at first. For example, he starts noticing how often she tried. Not the obvious efforts. The small ones. The ones that are easy to overlook. The conversation starters. The follow-up questions. The attempts to reconnect after tension. The messages sent despite uncertainty. The invitations. The patience. The emotional generosity. And here's where things become uncomfortable. Because once he starts noticing those things, another realization follows. He notices how often he assumed they would continue. Expected them. Relied on them. Without fully appreciating them. That realization can make a person cringe. I know it made me cringe. Because hindsight has a cruel sense of humor. Suddenly moments that felt ordinary become evidence. Evidence of care. Evidence of effort. Evidence of love expressed in ways that were too consistent to attract attention at the time. That's the paradox. Consistency often becomes invisible. People notice absence more easily than presence. They notice what disappears, not what quietly existed every day. Until it doesn't. Then comes another difficult realization. One almost nobody enjoys. Sometimes she wasn't asking for perfection. He tells himself she wanted too much. Too much communication. Too much emotional availability. Too much clarity. Too much reassurance. Then later, much later, he reviews those moments honestly. And the picture changes. Not completely, but enough. Enough to make him uncomfortable. Enough to make him wonder if what felt overwhelming then would seem incredibly reasonable now. That thought can keep a man awake. Not because he's drowning in guilt. Because he's confronting perspective. Perspective arrives late sometimes. Late enough to hurt. I remember lying awake one night replaying old messages. Not obsessively. Just reading. Scrolling. Looking. And what struck me wasn't what was written. It was what wasn't. All the things she wasn't doing. She wasn't demanding. She wasn't controlling. She wasn't trying to trap me. The story I had unconsciously created didn't fully match reality anymore. And once that crack appeared, more cracks followed. Because now he begins questioning his own narrative. Not her narrative. His. The explanations he used. The assumptions he made. The reasons he gave himself. And that process can feel deeply unsettling. People think self-awareness feels empowering. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it feels humiliating. Sometimes it feels like discovering you were both the witness and the unreliable narrator. That's what happens here. The story starts changing. Not because she's convincing him. She's not even there. That's what's fascinating. The realization often arrives in her absence. Without her participation. Without her explanation. Without her defending herself. Just him. Alone with the evidence. Alone with memory. Alone with delayed understanding. And somewhere inside that process a conversation begins. A private one. The kind nobody hears. The kind people have while driving home at night. Or staring at a ceiling. Or sitting alone in a parked car after arriving somewhere. The kind of conversation that sounds like this. She mattered. Then why didn't you act like it? I don't know. No, that's not true. You know something. Maybe. What? I thought there would be more time. That realization hits harder than most. Because it's painfully common. People assume availability. Assume future opportunities. Assume another conversation. Assume another chance. Assume the person will still be there when they're finally ready. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes they aren't. Nobody tells you how much of adult regret is built from assumptions. Not malicious choices. Assumptions. And now those assumptions are collapsing. Slowly. Painfully. One realization at a time. The emotional debt keeps arriving. Not as punishment. That's important. This isn't punishment. It's recognition. Recognition delayed long enough to become painful. Recognition delayed long enough to become regret. Recognition delayed long enough to reveal things he genuinely couldn't see before. And maybe that's why this phase feels so strange. Because he's not grieving a fantasy. He's grieving reality. Reality finally understood. Reality finally felt. Reality finally acknowledged. Months after it would have been useful. Months after it could have changed something. Months after he convinced himself none of it mattered that much. Now the evidence says otherwise. Now the memories say otherwise. Now the silence says otherwise. And for the first time, he starts realizing something that will become impossible to ignore in the chapters ahead. The problem was never that he didn't hear her. The problem was that he didn't fully hear himself. Not while she was still there. Not while the connection was still alive. Not while the opportunities still existed. The feelings arrived eventually. The understanding arrived eventually. The awareness arrived eventually. The tragedy is that eventually, and in time, are not always the same thing. And somewhere inside that realization, the debt continues collecting. One memory, one conversation, one delayed truth at a time. This is the part that confuses people. Because after the memories start returning, after the emotional debt begins collecting, after the delayed awareness starts creeping into everyday life, you would think sadness comes next. You would think grief arrives. You would think vulnerability finally breaks through. Sometimes it does. Eventually. But often, something else shows up first. Something much less attractive. Anger. Not explosive anger. Not throwing things across the room anger. The quieter kind. The kind that hides itself. The kind that disguises itself as annoyance. Irritation. Indifference. Sarcasm. Distance. The kind that doesn't even look like anger at first. Which is exactly why it's dangerous. Because most people don't recognize it. Especially him. He thinks he's frustrated. He thinks he's tired. He thinks he's stressed. Maybe he blames work. Maybe he blames circumstances. Maybe he blames her. Maybe he blames nobody. But underneath all of it, something emotional is beginning to boil. And he doesn't know what to do with it. I remember realizing this about myself in a way that was almost embarrassing. There was nothing wrong that day. Nothing had happened. Nobody had hurt me. Nobody had contacted me. Nothing dramatic. Yet somehow everything irritated me. The traffic. The weather. The slow internet. The grocery store line. A coworker asking a simple question. I remember sitting in my car feeling annoyed by things that normally wouldn't even register. And eventually a thought crossed my mind. A very uncomfortable thought. This isn't about traffic. And once that thought appeared, other questions followed. If it's not about traffic, what is it about? I didn't have an answer. Not immediately. That's the frustrating thing. Sometimes emotions surface before understanding arrives. The feeling comes first. The explanation shows up later. Much later. And during that gap, people do strange things. Especially men who aren't used to sitting with emotional uncertainty. Instead of feeling sadness directly, they fight with it, without realizing they're fighting with it. That's why this chapter matters. Because what looks like anger is often something much more vulnerable trying to get through. Something softer. Something that doesn't feel safe enough to exist openly. I think that's why some men become colder when they start caring more. Which sounds completely backwards. Because it is. But human beings are full of contradictions. Particularly when intimacy gets involved. He starts missing her. And somehow becomes more distant. He starts thinking about her. And somehow becomes more avoidant. He starts realizing she mattered. And somehow becomes more irritated whenever she crosses his mind. From the outside, it makes no sense. From the inside, it doesn't make much sense either. But I've lived it. And maybe you've witnessed it. Because sometimes the heart moves in one direction while the ego runs in another. And the conflict between those two forces creates friction. A lot of friction. The strange thing is that he often becomes angry at the person he misses. Not because she did something wrong. Because missing her feels inconvenient. That's the ugly truth. Missing her interrupts the story he's been trying to maintain. The story that says he's fine. The story that says he made peace with everything. The story that says he doesn't need anything from anyone. Then a memory appears. A feeling appears. A realization appears. And suddenly that story becomes harder to defend. So irritation shows up. Not because she's the problem. Because reality is. I remember opening someone's profile once. Not to message them. Not to reconnect. Not even because I had a plan. Just curiosity. At least that's what I told myself. 30 seconds. That's all it took. 30 seconds looking at a picture. And somehow my mood changed for the entire evening. Which felt ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. I remember actually being annoyed at myself. closing the app, putting the phone down, walking into the kitchen, opening the refrigerator, closing it again, then pacing around my apartment for no reason. The emotional maturity of that behavior was questionable. And that's the thing nobody talks about. Sometimes self-awareness doesn't make you act better immediately. Sometimes you're fully aware you're being irrational. And you're still doing it. You know you're avoiding something. You know you're projecting. You know you're upset. You know the anger isn't really about what you're pretending it's about. And yet there you are. Still pacing. Still checking. Still avoiding. Still pretending. Human beings are weird. And heartbreak, if that's even the right word yet, makes us weirder. Then another layer appears. Resentment. Not necessarily toward her, though sometimes toward her too. Toward the situation. Toward the timing. Toward the vulnerability. Toward the fact that awareness arrived after distance. Toward the fact that caring suddenly feels unavoidable. I think that's one of the hardest parts. He starts realizing things. And instead of feeling grateful for the realization, he feels angry about it. Because realization comes with responsibility. Once you see something clearly, it's harder to pretend you don't. Before, he could tell himself stories. Now those stories are breaking apart. And that process hurts. So naturally some resistance appears. Sometimes that resistance sounds like this. Why couldn't she just say what she wanted? Then another voice answers. She did. Not clearly enough. Did she really need to say it more clearly? The conversation ends there. Because honesty is difficult. Especially when it starts winning. That's another thing I've noticed. The internal arguments become harder to win. The old explanations stop working. The emotional shortcuts stop working. The certainty disappears. And uncertainty makes people uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. So he starts doing contradictory things. Checking her profile while convincing himself he doesn't care. Thinking about reaching out while deciding not to. Writing messages. Deleting messages. Opening old conversations. Closing them immediately. Looking for evidence she moved on. Feeling hurt if she did. Feeling relieved if she didn't. Wanting connection. Resenting the need for connection. Missing her. Being irritated by missing her. Contradiction after contradiction. I think this is where many people misunderstand masculine avoidance. They assume it's always about not caring. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes avoidance increases when emotional significance increases. Not because that's healthy. Because vulnerability becomes harder to control. And control is comforting. Feelings aren't. Feelings are messy. Feelings interrupt schedules. Feelings don't respect logic. Feelings show up while you're trying to focus on something else. One random song. One random memory. One random smell. And suddenly you're somewhere emotionally you weren't planning to be. The body gets involved too. People rarely talk about that part. The restlessness. The inability to relax. The random bursts of energy. The nights that feel strangely long. The scrolling. The checking. The inability to settle. It's almost like the nervous system knows something is unresolved before the conscious mind admits it. I remember cleaning my apartment one night at nearly midnight. Not because it needed cleaning. Because I couldn't sit still. I organized drawers. Rearranged shelves. Threw away old receipts. Moved furniture. Anything to avoid sitting down and actually feeling what was happening. Looking back, it was obvious. At the time, it felt productive. Again, avoidance can wear very respectable clothing. That's why it's difficult to recognize. Then comes the most uncomfortable realization of this phase. The anger isn't protecting him from her. It's protecting him from grief. Because grief is vulnerable. Grief admits value. Grief admits attachment. Grief admits loss. Anger feels stronger. Safer. More controlled. More masculine if we're being honest. At least according to the stories many men are taught. So the anger stands guard. For a while. But eventually it starts getting tired. Because maintaining emotional resistance requires energy. And energy runs out. The irritation starts cracking. The resentment starts cracking. The defensiveness starts cracking. And underneath those cracks, something softer becomes visible. Not fully. Not yet. Just enough to notice. Just enough to make him uncomfortable. Just enough to keep him awake a little longer at night. Just enough to create silence after a memory instead of immediate distraction. And that's when the next phase begins. Not because the anger disappears, because it stops working. The frustration that once protected him is losing its strength. The stories that once justified everything are losing their certainty. And somewhere underneath all of that emotional noise, something honest is waiting. Something he has been avoiding for a very long time. Not her. The truth about what she meant to him. And for the first time, he's running out of places to hide from it. I don't think there is one dramatic moment when everything changes. At least there wasn't for me. There wasn't some movie scene where the truth arrived all at once. No life-changing text message. No emotional collapse in the rain. No perfect realization. What actually happened was much quieter. Much more human. The argument simply got harder to win. That's the best way I can describe it. For months he has been maintaining a story. Not necessarily a lie. Just a story. A version of events that allows him to keep functioning. A version where everything makes sense. A version where he doesn't have to look too closely at his own contradictions. And for a while that story works. Until one night it doesn't. Usually at night. It's almost always at night. Because nighttime is unfair. The distractions disappear. The meetings end. The errands stop. The phone gets quieter. The world shrinks. And suddenly there's nothing between him and his own thoughts. That's when the argument begins. Or maybe that's when it becomes impossible to avoid. I remember driving home one night. No destination in mind. Just driving. You know those nights. The ones where you tell yourself you're clearing your head. But you're actually circling the same thoughts over and over. The road was nearly empty. A few cars. A few streetlights. The kind of silence that only exists after midnight. And for some reason I kept replaying a conversation. Not an important conversation. Not one of the big moments. One of the small ones. The dangerous ones. The ones that don't seem important until much later. She had asked me a simple question. A ridiculously simple question. Something like, "Are you happy?" That's it. Nothing profound. Nothing complicated. And I remember giving an answer. A perfectly acceptable answer. A functional answer. An answer designed to end the conversation. The kind of answer emotionally unavailable people become very good at giving. And for some reason, while driving through a nearly empty city months later, I suddenly remembered the look on her face. Not disappointment. Not anger. Something else. Something sadder. Recognition. As if she already knew I wasn't being honest. Not lying. Just withholding. And that realization followed me home. The strange thing about delayed awareness is that it never arrives all at once. It comes in waves. A memory. A feeling. A realization. Then silence. Then another wave. Then another. And eventually the evidence becomes difficult to ignore. That's what happens during this phase. The evidence starts piling up. Not evidence against her. Evidence against the story he's been telling himself. And that's where the internal dialogue changes. Before it was easy. Before he could explain everything. Now the explanations are starting to sound weaker. The certainty is disappearing. And certainty is comforting. Losing certainty isn't. So the mind starts arguing. Almost constantly. Not in words at first. Just tension. Resistance. Mental friction. Then eventually the dialogue becomes audible. At least internally. It starts sounding something like this. She mattered. Not that much. Then why are you still thinking about her? Why are you still replaying conversations? People replay conversations. Months later, the silence gets longer. The answers become slower. And that's how he knows something is changing. The defenses aren't working as efficiently anymore. I think that's what people misunderstand about emotional awakening, or whatever you want to call it. It isn't the arrival of truth. It's the collapse of resistance. Truth was often sitting there the entire time. The resistance just got weaker. And resistance gets exhausted, especially when it's fighting reality. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed one night around 2 in the morning. The room was dark except for the light from my phone, and I found myself opening old messages. Not because I planned to. Not because I was trying to torture myself. It just happened. One message became another. Then another. Then another. Suddenly I was reading conversations from months earlier. The embarrassing part? I wasn't looking for evidence of what she said. I was looking for evidence that I had been right. That's what ego does. It gathers evidence. It builds cases. It creates narratives. It wants validation. The problem is that reality doesn't always cooperate. And that night reality wasn't cooperating. Because the more I read, the harder it became to maintain the story. Not because she was perfect. She wasn't. Nobody is. But the version of her I had created in my frustration didn't fully match the actual person anymore. That's a painful realization. Because now another argument begins. The argument between memory and narrative. Memory says one thing. The story says another. And eventually one of them has to lose. That's when the deeper questions start appearing. Questions he avoided earlier because they felt too threatening. Questions like, why did intimacy make me uncomfortable? Why did I pull away when things became real? Why did I keep asking for patience while offering uncertainty? Why did I keep saying I needed space? Did I actually need space? Or did I need distance from my own feelings? Those questions don't feel empowering. They feel invasive. Because they force honesty. And honesty is expensive. Especially when it arrives late. One night the dialogue becomes impossible to ignore. It sounds something like this. She mattered. Then why did you act like she didn't? I don't know. No, that's not true. You know something. Maybe. What? A long pause. The kind of pause that exists when someone is standing near a truth they don't want to touch. Then finally, I was scared. Of what? Another pause. Longer this time. Of needing her. That's the answer he doesn't want. Because needing someone feels dangerous. Needing someone creates vulnerability. Dependency. Exposure. Risk. Most people want connection. But very few people enjoy the feeling of needing it. Especially if they've spent years building an identity around independence. So he told himself he needed freedom. Space. Time. Clarity. And maybe some of that was true. But now another possibility is appearing. What if freedom wasn't the whole story? What if fear was part of it too? That's where the argument starts collapsing. Because now he's questioning the motivations underneath his actions. Not just the actions themselves. And motivations are harder to defend. Much harder. I think that's why this phase feels so emotionally exhausting. He's not fighting her anymore. He's fighting himself. Or more specifically, he's fighting the version of himself that wants to stay asleep. The version that wants simple answers. Simple explanations. Simple villains. Simple conclusions. Unfortunately, reality is becoming more complicated. And more honest. Then comes one of the most uncomfortable moments. A memory returns. Not a dramatic memory. Something ordinary. She was talking. He was half listening. She was trying to explain how she felt. He was already thinking about his response. And suddenly he sees it. Not intellectually. Emotionally. He sees the loneliness she was carrying, while sitting right beside him. That realization can break something open. Because loneliness inside a relationship feels different than loneliness outside of one. And now he recognizes moments he completely misunderstood. Moments he dismissed. Moments he minimized. Moments he thought would always be available for later discussion. The problem is that later has arrived. And she's not here to explain them anymore. So now he has to do the work himself. No guidance. No reassurance. No clarification. Just memory. And memory is a brutal teacher sometimes. The strange thing is that none of this means he suddenly becomes enlightened. Not even close. The next day he might still avoid. Still distract himself. Still hesitate. Still do nothing. That's important. Awareness doesn't automatically create action. People love stories where realization instantly changes behavior. Real life is messier. Sometimes a person knows exactly what they're doing wrong and continues doing it anyway. At least for a while. Because growth and awareness don't move at the same speed. But something has changed. The argument is no longer one-sided. That's the difference. Before, denial won easily. Now denial has to work harder. Now every explanation faces resistance. Now every excuse gets questioned. Now every narrative gets challenged. And eventually one realization becomes impossible to escape. Not because someone taught it to him. Not because she convinced him. Because he finally hears it himself. She mattered. A pause. A deep breath. Silence. Then the final question. The question he's been avoiding since the beginning. Then why did you wait so long to admit it? And for the first time, he doesn't have an answer. Only silence. Real silence. Not defensive silence. Not strategic silence. Not avoidance. Just the silence that appears when the truth has finally entered the room. And once that silence arrives, the next stage becomes unavoidable. Because now he isn't just remembering her. He's beginning to confront himself. And that's where the story gets even harder. This is where the story quietly changes. Up until now, he's been focused on her. The memories. The conversations. The things he didn't understand. The things he wishes he had handled differently. The things he now sees with painful clarity. But eventually something unexpected happens. The spotlight starts moving. Away from her. Toward him. And honestly, that's usually where the real discomfort begins. Because for a long time, he thought the pain was about missing her. And part of it is. Of course it is. But after enough late nights, after enough replayed conversations, after enough unanswered questions, he begins noticing something strange. Even when he isn't thinking about her. Something still hurts. Something still feels unsettled. Something still feels incomplete. And that's when a terrifying possibility appears. What if she wasn't the thing he was trying to avoid? What if she was protecting him from the thing he was trying to avoid? That's a completely different question. And it's not nearly as romantic. It's much more personal. Much more uncomfortable. I remember a period where I became obsessed with figuring out what had happened. I analyzed everything. Conversations. Text messages. Mistakes. Timing. Behavior. I wanted answers. I wanted explanations. I wanted the emotional puzzle solved. And for months I convinced myself that if I could just understand the relationship, I would finally feel peace. Then one night something happened. Not dramatic. Just honest. I realized I had spent months investigating her. Without investigating myself. And that realization hit harder than anything else. Because once I stopped staring at the relationship, I started noticing what existed underneath it. Things I didn't particularly want to see. Loneliness. Fear. Insecurity. Not the obvious kind. The quiet kind. The kind that hides inside competence. The kind that exists inside successful people. The kind that survives behind confidence. The kind nobody notices. Sometimes not even you. I think that's what happens here. Her presence was doing something he never fully understood. Not intentionally. Not consciously. But it was happening. She was softening certain parts of life. The difficult days. The empty evenings. The moments of self-doubt. The quiet fears. The existential loneliness most people carry around. She wasn't solving those things. She was simply making them easier to tolerate. And that's an important distinction. Because when she steps back, those things don't disappear. They become visible. I remember sitting in my apartment one Saturday afternoon. No plans. No obligations. Nothing urgent. The kind of day most people dream about. Complete freedom. And I hated it. Not because anything was wrong. Because there was nowhere left to hide. No deadlines. No distractions. No emergencies. Just me. And the realization that I didn't actually enjoy my own company as much as I pretended. That realization embarrassed me. Deeply. Because I had spent years building an identity around independence. Being self-sufficient. Being strong. Being capable. Being fine on my own. And in many ways I was. But independence and emotional avoidance are not always the same thing. Sometimes they wear similar clothes. And that's where things become complicated. Because now he's beginning to recognize that some of the discomfort isn't about losing her. It's about losing the buffer she unknowingly provided. The emotional cushion. The place where certain fears became quieter. The place where certain insecurities became less noticeable. The place where loneliness had less room to speak. And now loneliness is speaking. Not loudly. Just clearly. The scary thing about loneliness isn't always being alone. Sometimes it's discovering how disconnected you've been from yourself. That's a much harder problem. And a much more personal one. This is where many men encounter something they've spent years outrunning. Not women. Not relationships. Themselves. The version of themselves that only appears when the distractions disappear. The version that asks questions. Questions like, why do I pull away when someone gets close? Why does intimacy feel comforting one day and threatening the next? Why do I keep wanting connection and freedom simultaneously? Why do I feel trapped when someone loves me? Why do I feel empty when they stop? Those questions don't have quick answers. And that's what makes them frustrating. Human beings love problems they can solve. These aren't those kinds of problems. These are the kinds of questions that sit beside you. Quietly. For months. Maybe years. I remember driving home one evening after spending time with friends. Everyone had laughed. Everyone had a good time. The night was objectively successful. And yet during the drive home I felt strangely empty. Not devastated. Not depressed. Just empty. And I couldn't figure out why. For weeks I blamed the wrong things. Work stress. Lack of sleep. Burnout. The economy. Anything. Everything. Eventually I had to admit something. The feeling wasn't new. It had been there the whole time. I just couldn't hear it before. Because there had always been enough noise. That's what happens here. Her absence doesn't create every problem. It reveals some of them. And revelation feels very different than creation. Because now he can't blame everything on the relationship. Some of the discomfort existed long before her. Some of the fears existed long before her. Some of the loneliness existed long before her. She simply interrupted them. Temporarily. And now they're back. Waiting. Patiently. Like they never left. I think one of the hardest realizations comes when he starts recognizing old patterns. Not relationship patterns. Life patterns. The way he distracts himself. The way he avoids difficult emotions. The way he uses productivity as emotional anesthesia. The way he fills every empty moment. The way he reaches for stimulation whenever silence appears. Phone. Television. Work. Music. podcasts, anything, everything. Just keep moving. Just keep consuming. Just keep thinking about something else. Because if he stops, he might actually hear himself. And hearing himself is becoming harder to avoid. One night the dialogue returns. The internal dialogue that's been slowly growing stronger. Only now it sounds different. Less focused on her. More focused on him. What are you actually afraid of? Silence. Then, I don't know. No, try again. A longer silence. Then finally, being disappointed. By her. No. Then by who? A pause. The longest one yet. Myself. That answer changes everything. Because disappointment in another person is manageable. Disappointment in yourself is much harder. Especially when you're beginning to realize how often you've abandoned your own emotional truth. How often you've chosen comfort over honesty. Distance over vulnerability. Control over connection. Certainty over authenticity. Those realizations don't feel spiritual. They feel personal. Painfully personal. And this is where the story becomes less about romance and more about identity. Because now he's confronting something deeper than loss. He's confronting the gap between who he is and who he wants to be. The gap between emotional awareness and emotional courage. The gap between understanding and action. The gap between feeling something and admitting it. And those gaps are exhausting. I think that's why many people become so tired during this stage. They're carrying two realities at once. The reality they've lived, and the reality they're finally seeing. Reconciling those realities takes energy. A lot of energy. Especially when pride gets involved. Especially when regret gets involved. Especially when self-awareness starts removing places to hide. Then one day another realization appears. A simple one. A quiet one. But powerful. He misses her. Yes. But that's not all. He misses the version of himself that existed when he felt emotionally connected. Not perfect. Not healed. Not transformed. Connected. Alive. Open. More honest. And suddenly the loss becomes bigger than a person. It's about a way of being. A way of feeling. A way of existing. That's what her absence stops protecting him from. Not just loneliness. Not just regret. Not just memories. It stops protecting him from the unfinished parts of himself. The neglected parts. The frightened parts. The parts that hoped nobody would ever look too closely. Especially him. But now he's looking. Maybe for the first time. Really looking. And once that process begins, it becomes almost impossible to reverse. Because the questions are changing. The focus is changing. The story is changing. He started this journey trying to understand her. Now he's beginning to understand something much harder. Why he became who he became. Why he ran. Why he resisted. Why he stayed emotionally divided for so long. And somewhere inside that uncomfortable realization, another truth begins emerging. The thing he thought was ending may have actually been exposing a beginning. Not a beginning with her. A beginning with himself. And whether he likes it or not, that conversation has finally started. This is the part most people never admit out loud. Not because it's rare. Because it's embarrassing. By now he's already gone through the obvious stages. The relief. The distance. The memories. The irritation. The self-confrontation. The uncomfortable questions. The late-night realizations. And somewhere in the middle of all that, something happens. He finally admits that he misses her. At least partially. At least privately. But even that realization isn't as clean as people imagine. Because when he thinks about missing her, he expects dramatic things. The big moments. The emotional conversations. The intimate memories. The romantic experiences. The milestones. Instead, he misses weird things. Tiny things. Stupid things. Things that make absolutely no sense. That's what catches him off guard. I remember realizing this one afternoon. I was standing in a grocery store trying to choose pasta sauce. A completely ordinary task. Nothing emotional. Nothing meaningful. Just grocery shopping. And for some reason I remembered the way she used to spend 10 minutes comparing labels. 10 minutes. For pasta sauce. Which used to drive me insane. I would stand there impatiently waiting while she analyzed ingredients like she was preparing for a medical exam. At the time I found it annoying. Months later I was standing alone in that same aisle. Smiling like an idiot. Because suddenly I missed it. Not her. Well, her too. But specifically that. That ridiculous habit. That unnecessary attention to detail. That tiny, forgettable behavior. And that's when I realized something. People think they miss relationships. A lot of the time they miss ordinary life. Shared life. The little pieces. The invisible rituals. The things nobody photographs. Nobody posts. Nobody writes poems about. The stupid inside jokes. The repeated phrases. The familiar interruptions. The predictable quirks. That's where the ache lives. Not always in the grand moments. In the ordinary ones. And ordinary memories are dangerous. Because they sneak past defenses. It's easy to prepare for anniversary dates. It's easy to prepare for birthdays. It's harder to prepare for the memory of someone always stealing your fries. Or correcting your pronunciation. Or sending voice notes instead of texts. Or saying the same phrase every single time they left a room. Those memories don't knock. They just walk in. Uninvited. Then sit down. And stay a while. This is where things become emotionally awkward. Because now he isn't just missing her. He's actively trying not to miss her. Which creates a strange internal conflict. One part of him wants to remember. Another part wants relief. One part wants connection. Another part wants distance. And neither side fully wins. So his behavior becomes contradictory. Again, human beings are incredibly consistent in their inconsistency. He opens her profile. Closes it. Tells himself he's done. Checks again 3 days later. He scrolls through old photos. Stops halfway. Feels ridiculous. Puts the phone down. Picks it up again 20 minutes later. Not because he has a plan. Because emotions don't operate according to plans. And that's frustrating. Especially for people who like control. Especially for men who spent years believing emotions should be manageable. I remember typing a message once. A simple message. Nothing dramatic. Nothing life-changing. Just a message. I wrote it. Read it. Deleted it. Wrote another version. Deleted that one too. Then locked my phone and threw it onto the couch. As if the phone had done something wrong. 3 hours later I picked it up and wrote another one. Then deleted that too. The message never got sent. What stayed with me wasn't the message. It was the realization. I wasn't struggling with what to say. I was struggling with what the message would mean. Because reaching out means admitting something. And admission creates vulnerability. Vulnerability creates uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. So instead he remained stuck. Half moving forward. Half moving backward. Missing her. Resisting missing her. Both at once. The body gets involved again. The body always gets involved. People underestimate how physical emotions are. The heaviness in the chest. The restlessness. The sudden bursts of energy. The inability to focus. The random urge to check your phone. The strange feeling of relief when her name doesn't appear. Followed immediately by disappointment. That's a particularly confusing one. Relief and disappointment. Back to back. Almost simultaneously. I felt that. Maybe you have too. You check. Nothing there. Part of you relaxes. Good. No emotional complication. No difficult decisions. No vulnerability. Then another part quietly says, "Oh, nothing there." And suddenly you're carrying two opposite emotions in the same moment. Human beings are strange that way. We want things, then panic when they appear. We fear things, then miss them when they're gone. We crave certainty, then become bored by it. We are walking contradictions, and nowhere is that more obvious than here. Then comes the truly embarrassing part. The timestamps. Nobody talks about the timestamps. Looking at old messages. Not reading them. Just looking. The date. The time. The evidence that a particular moment actually happened. As if somehow the timestamp proves the memory was real. I remember staring at a conversation once. Not even reading the words. Just looking at the date. Trying to understand how something that felt emotionally recent had happened so long ago. Months. Maybe longer. And that realization created a different kind of sadness. Not grief. Perspective. The realization that life continues moving whether you're emotionally caught up or not. Time keeps doing its job, even when your heart is lagging behind. That's a difficult realization, especially for someone who assumed there would always be more time. Then the unsent conversations begin. Not actual conversations. Internal ones. Imaginary ones. The conversations nobody hears. The ones that happen while driving. Showering. Walking. Trying to fall asleep. He starts explaining things she never asked him to explain. Answering questions she never asked. Defending actions she never challenged. The mind does strange things when closure doesn't arrive neatly. Sometimes it creates conversations to compensate. And in those private conversations, honesty starts slipping through. Not constantly. Just occasionally. Enough to matter. Do you miss her? A pause. No. Another pause. A longer one. Not exactly. Silence. Then what? A deep breath. The way I felt with her. That answer changes everything. Because now the feeling becomes harder to dismiss. Harder to simplify. Harder to reduce. Maybe he misses her. Maybe he misses connection. Maybe he misses the version of himself that existed during that chapter of life. Maybe he misses all three. Human emotions rarely arrive separated into neat categories. They arrive tangled together. And untangling them takes time. A lot of time. Sometimes too much time. The most painful realization arrives quietly. Like most important realizations do. He begins noticing that some of the things he misses are the exact things he once took for granted. Her consistency. Her presence. Her effort. Her patience. The small daily expressions of care. The things that felt ordinary while they were happening. The things that felt guaranteed. The things he assumed would continue indefinitely. Until they didn't. And now those ordinary things seem extraordinary. Not because they changed. Because his perspective changed. That's the cruel humor of hindsight. Value often becomes visible through absence. Not presence. Then comes the moment that surprises him most. He realizes he isn't checking her profile because he expects something. He's checking because he cares. And admitting that feels vulnerable. Painfully vulnerable. Because caring removes the last layer of protection. The last layer of detachment. The last layer of performance. Now he can no longer pretend this was insignificant. Now he can no longer pretend she was just another experience. Now he can no longer pretend the connection left no mark. It did. Clearly. Deeply. Humanly. Not in some mystical way. Not in some dramatic way. In the simplest way possible. She became part of his daily life. Then she wasn't. And the human heart struggles with that transition. Even when the mind understands it. Especially when the mind understands it. By now the resistance is weaker. The denial is weaker. The anger is weaker. The distractions are weaker. And what's left is something much harder to argue with. A simple truth. An embarrassingly human truth. He misses her. Not perfectly. Not constantly. Not every day. Not every moment. But enough. Enough that ordinary things still carry her fingerprints. Enough that certain memories still stop him in his tracks. Enough that some silences still feel different than they should. Enough that pretending otherwise is becoming exhausting. And once a person reaches that point, the next realization is waiting. Because missing her was never the final truth. It's only the doorway. The deeper truth is still coming. And when it arrives, it will force him to see the entire story differently. The strange thing about real understanding is that it rarely arrives with fireworks. Nobody announces it. There isn't a dramatic soundtrack. There isn't a perfect moment where every piece suddenly clicks into place. At least not in my experience. Real understanding arrives the way morning does. Slowly. So slowly that you don't notice it's happening until the room is already brighter. And that's what happens here. After the memories. After the anger. After the late-night arguments. After the embarrassing admissions. After the endless internal conversations. Something begins changing. Not dramatically. Quietly. The need to defend himself starts fading. And that changes everything. Because as long as a person is defending themselves, they're not really looking. They're preparing arguments. Preparing explanations. Preparing reasons. Preparing evidence. They're trying to win a case. But eventually exhaustion takes over. And exhaustion has a strange relationship with truth. Sometimes when you're tired enough, you stop fighting reality. I think that's what happened to me. Not all at once. Just gradually. One small realization at a time. I remember sitting alone one evening after work. Nothing unusual. The television was on. I wasn't paying attention. A plate sat on the coffee table. The room was quiet except for the background noise of a show I wasn't actually watching. And for the first time in months, I stopped trying to figure out who was right. That sounds insignificant. It's not. Because for a long time, that's what I had been doing. Trying to determine who misunderstood who. Who pulled away first. Who should have communicated better. Who carried more responsibility. Who failed whom. Normal questions. Human questions. But that night another question appeared. A simpler one. A harder one. What actually happened? Not who was right. Not who was wrong. What happened? And somehow that question changed the entire landscape. Because when the ego leaves the room, the story starts looking different. Much different. Suddenly he notices things that were always there. Things he couldn't see while he was busy protecting himself. For example, he starts realizing she wasn't trying to control him. That's a big one. Because fear often translates care into control. Concern into pressure. Consistency into expectation. Intimacy into obligation. When someone is emotionally overwhelmed, those distinctions become blurry. Very blurry. And looking back, he starts seeing moments differently. Moments he once interpreted one way. Moments that now carry completely different meanings. I remember replaying a conversation one afternoon. One of those conversations I had mentally filed away years earlier. At the time, I remember feeling pressured. Cornered. Misunderstood. At least that's the story I told myself. Then I replayed it again. Slowly. Honestly. And for the first time I noticed something. She wasn't demanding certainty. She was asking for honesty. Those aren't the same thing. Not even close. But at the time I treated them as identical. Because honesty felt dangerous. Honesty would have required me to admit confusion. Fear. Ambivalence. Vulnerability. Things I wasn't comfortable admitting. Not even to myself. And suddenly I could see it. Not because she explained it. Not because someone taught it to me. Because the distance finally gave me perspective. That's one of the strange gifts of time. It removes urgency. And when urgency disappears, truth sometimes becomes easier to see. Not always, but sometimes. Then another realization appears. An even harder one. She had been emotionally present for much longer than he understood. That's the painful part. Because consistency becomes invisible when it's always there. People adapt to it. Expect it. Normalize it. The same way nobody notices the hum of an air conditioner until it stops. Then suddenly the silence feels enormous. I think that's what happened here. For a long time, her presence became part of the background. Not because she wasn't valuable. Because she was reliable. And reliability often hides its own significance. Until it's gone. Then every little thing becomes obvious. The check-ins. The effort. The patience. The attempts. The emotional availability. The willingness to stay engaged even during difficult moments. Things that seemed ordinary while they were happening now appear extraordinary. Not because they changed. Because his perception changed. And perception changes slowly. Painfully slowly. Then comes the realization that hurts the most. The realization that almost nobody enjoys admitting. He wasn't just resisting her. He was resisting the impact she had on him. That's different. Much different. Because now the story stops being about compatibility. Stops being about timing. Stops being about circumstances. Now it's about influence. And influence is uncomfortable. Especially when you've built your identity around being unaffected. Independent. Self-contained. Emotionally self-sufficient. Then someone enters your life, and suddenly your moods change when they leave. Your thoughts change when they withdraw. Your habits change when they're absent. Your emotional landscape shifts around their presence. That's difficult to admit. Because it means they mattered. More than you wanted them to. Maybe more than you realized. I remember one specific moment. A completely ordinary moment. I was laughing with friends. Genuinely laughing. Having a good time. Nothing was wrong. And then somebody said something. A phrase. A joke. Something she would have loved. And without thinking, I turned my head slightly. As if she were there. As if I was about to share the moment with her. The movement lasted less than a second. But it revealed everything. The body moved before the mind could stop it. And suddenly I understood. Some part of me had integrated her into my experience of life. Not in a dramatic way. In a human way. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. That's what happens in this chapter. The truth stops being theoretical. It becomes undeniable. Not because of one giant realization. Because of hundreds of tiny ones. Accumulating. Stacking. Building. Until eventually they form a picture. And the picture says something he can no longer avoid. She mattered. Not in the abstract. Not in the spiritual. Not in the poetic. In the practical. Daily. Human sense. She became woven into the fabric of his life. And he didn't fully understand that while it was happening. Then comes the strange mixture of regret and gratitude. Both at once. Another contradiction. Human beings seem incapable of avoiding contradictions. Part of him regrets what he couldn't see. Part of him feels grateful that he can see it now. Part of him wishes awareness had arrived sooner. Part of him understands that awareness arrives when it arrives. Part of him wants another chance. Part of him knows that wanting and receiving are different things. And that's where maturity begins entering the story. Not because he gets everything he wants. Because he starts seeing reality without demanding it be different. That's a painful form of maturity. A quiet one. The kind nobody celebrates. The kind that happens alone. The kind that happens while sitting in your apartment on a random Thursday evening. The kind that happens while staring out a window. The kind that happens while rereading an old message and finally understanding it. No applause. No witnesses. Just truth. Then the internal dialogue returns one last time. Only now it sounds different. Less defensive. Less argumentative. more honest. She mattered. Yes. Did you know that then? A long silence. Not fully. Why not? Another pause. Not because he doesn't know. Because he does. And admitting it hurts. I thought there would always be more time. There it is. The sentence hiding underneath everything. The assumption. The invisible assumption. More time. Another conversation. Another opportunity. Another chance. Another tomorrow. Human beings build entire lives around assumptions like that. Then reality arrives. Quietly. Without asking permission. And suddenly the future you expected no longer exists. Not necessarily because it's impossible. Because it's uncertain. And uncertainty forces clarity. Now he understands something that once felt impossible to see. She wasn't trying to force him into awareness. She wasn't trying to manipulate him into growth. She wasn't orchestrating some lesson. She was simply showing up. Showing up consistently. Showing up honestly. Showing up emotionally. For longer than he realized. And when that presence disappeared, the truth finally had enough silence to be heard. That's the moment he finally sees what happened. Not perfectly. Not completely. But honestly. And honesty changes everything. Because once the truth becomes visible, the final chapter can begin. Not the chapter about her. Not even the chapter about them. The chapter about the dynamic itself. The one that was quietly operating underneath the entire story from the very beginning. The one he couldn't see until he lost the ability to avoid it. And once he sees that, there's no going back. So here we are. After all the memories. After the late-night drives. After the unsent messages. After the anger. After the avoidance. After the strange loneliness. After the realization that arrived months too late. We're finally standing in front of the thing that was there the entire time. The dynamic. The one nobody talks about honestly. The one people often turn into something mystical. Something dramatic. Something larger than life. But the longer I've lived, the less interested I am in dramatic explanations. Most of the experiences that changed me weren't dramatic. They were quiet. Almost invisible. This was one of them. Because the truth is, she didn't wake him up by chasing him. She didn't wake him up by convincing him. She didn't wake him up by sacrificing herself endlessly. She didn't wake him up through some perfect speech. She didn't wake him up through pressure. Or persuasion. Or emotional intensity. The thing that changed him was much more uncomfortable than that. She stopped protecting him from himself. That's it. That's the forbidden dynamic. And the reason people don't like talking about it is because it removes the fantasy. It removes the idea that awareness comes through magic. It doesn't. Awareness often comes through absence. Through silence. Through space. Through the removal of distractions. And unfortunately, that process hurts. A lot. Because when someone has been quietly carrying emotional weight for a long time, you don't fully understand what they were holding until they set it down. Then suddenly you feel the weight yourself. I remember helping a friend move furniture years ago. One of those giant wooden dressers that looked manageable until you actually tried lifting it. The two of us carried it up a staircase. At one point I adjusted my grip. Just slightly. And suddenly most of the weight shifted onto my side. For half a second I thought, how was he carrying this much? That's what this dynamic feels like emotionally. The weight shifts. And suddenly he understands something he couldn't see before. Not because she explained it better. Because he's finally carrying his share. The loneliness. The uncertainty. The emotional responsibility. The self-reflection. The questions. The vulnerability. Things she had been engaging with for much longer than he realized. And once the weight shifts, everything starts looking different. That's why so many realizations arrive after distance. Not because distance creates love. That's an oversimplification. Distance creates visibility. Those aren't the same thing. Visibility is what changes him. Visibility is what exposes him. Visibility is what forces honesty. Because now there's nobody bridging the emotional gap for him. Nobody initiating repair. Nobody maintaining connection. Nobody carrying hope on difficult days. Nobody making excuses for him. Nobody softening the consequences of emotional absence. Now he's standing face to face with reality. And reality has a way of simplifying things. Not immediately, but eventually. The strange thing is that many people expect this realization to lead directly to action. A phone call, a message, a reunion, a grand gesture. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. That's another uncomfortable truth. Awareness and outcome are not the same thing. A man can finally understand everything and still be too late. He can finally see clearly and still be unable to change the ending. Life doesn't always reward awareness with opportunity. Sometimes awareness itself is the lesson. I know people hate hearing that. I hate hearing that. But it's true. There are moments in my own life where understanding arrived after the chapter had already ended. Not because I didn't care, because I wasn't ready to see. And readiness cannot be forced, no matter how badly we wish otherwise. This is where I think many people misunderstand emotional growth. They imagine it looks beautiful, noble, inspiring. Most of the time it looks awkward. It looks like sitting alone on a couch realizing someone was more important than you admitted. It looks like rereading old conversations. It looks like remembering things you wish you had noticed sooner. It looks like feeling grateful and regretful simultaneously. It looks like reaching understanding long after certainty disappeared. It's messy, human, uncomfortable, real. I remember one night opening an old voice note. Not because I was trying to relive anything. I was actually looking for something else. A piece of information. A date. Something practical. Then I heard her laugh. Just for a second. A random moment before the actual message started. And I froze. Not because I was overwhelmed. Because I wasn't expecting it. The body reacted before the mind did. That seems to happen a lot when something is real. The body knows first. Then the realization followed. The thing I missed wasn't just her. It was the way life felt when connection was still alive. The sense of possibility. The openness. The emotional movement. The feeling that someone genuinely saw me. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. And suddenly the entire story rearranged itself. Not into a story about loss. Into a story about recognition. Recognition delayed. Recognition resisted. Recognition eventually accepted. That's the dynamic. Not that she left. Not that she stopped caring. Not even that he missed her. The real dynamic is that her withdrawal removed the emotional shelter that allowed him to avoid himself. Once that shelter disappeared, the encounter became unavoidable. And here's where I need to be careful. Because this isn't about turning her into a saint. She wasn't perfect. No one is. Maybe she made mistakes too. Maybe she withdrew imperfectly. Maybe she communicated imperfectly. Maybe she carried wounds of her own. That's not the point. The point is much simpler. She stopped doing work that wasn't hers to do. And when she stopped, he finally saw what had been hidden. Sometimes growth begins exactly there. Not in union. Not in loss. Not in romance. In exposure. The exposure of reality. The exposure of patterns. The exposure of fear. The exposure of emotional truth. And exposure rarely feels good. It just feels necessary. That's why this story doesn't end with certainty. I wish it did. I wish I could tell you he called her. Or she came back. Or they found each other again. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. Real life doesn't always provide neat endings. Sometimes people reconnect. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes healing creates reunion. Sometimes healing creates acceptance. Both happen. Neither is guaranteed. What matters is that he finally sees. Really sees. Not just her. Himself. The parts he avoided. The fears he disguised. The emotions he postponed. The truths he delayed. The cost of waiting. The cost of assuming there would always be more time. And once a person sees those things honestly, they can't completely unsee them. That's where the story leaves him. Not transformed overnight. Not suddenly perfect. Not magically healed. Just more honest. And honesty is a bigger change than most people realize. Because honesty ends the argument. Not the sadness. Not the longing. Not the uncertainty. The argument. The endless internal negotiation. The endless excuses. The endless attempts to explain away what was always true. Now he knows. And knowledge creates a different kind of silence. A quieter one. A more mature one. The kind that no longer needs to win. The kind that no longer needs to defend itself. The kind that simply sits beside reality. And maybe that's where the final conversation happens. The last internal dialogue. The one he's been avoiding from the beginning. Do you think he loved her? A long silence. The kind of silence that only appears after someone stops lying to themselves. Then, sometimes, another pause. A small smile. A sad one. The kind people smile when they're finally being honest. More than he knew. Silence again. Then the final question. And now, a deep breath. A glance toward a future that feels uncertain. A future without guarantees. Without certainty. Without promises. Just truth. And finally the answer. Now he has to live with knowing. And strangely, that might be the beginning. Not of getting her back. Not of rewriting the past. Not of fixing everything. Just the beginning of becoming someone who no longer runs from what is real. And for some people, that is the most important reunion that ever happens.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.